For his view on Qantas and the debt, I spoke to the Finance Minister Mathias Cormann earlier today. Mathias Cormann, welcome to Capitol Hill.
Good to be back.
If we could start with the announcement from Qantas, it's cutting at least 1,000 jobs this year with the potential of more to come. The CEO and the board have taken pay cuts. It's announced a pre-tax half-year loss of up to $300 billion. Qantas is asking for the government's help. Are you prepared to help Qantas? Well,
what we've said is clearly there's a conversation to be had around the restrictions on Qantas out of the Qantas Sale Act. The competitive environment for Qantas has changed quite significantly since the Qantas Sale Act was legislated. Obviously, I mean, these are considerations that government is going to go through carefully, methodically, in a proper way, and when we have something to announce, we'll announce it.
Qantas has offered you a range of potential options beyond increasing the foreign ownership levels or perhaps an equity injection. It says it doesn't get tax benefits or concessions, preferred access to airports or preferential access to Australian government business. Is changing the Sales Act your preference out of all of those options?
Well, I mean, I think that this is very much a hypothetical conversation at the moment. You say they've offered us a range of options. We don't have a formal proposal in front of us, a formal request in front of us. I suspect that that might well happen in the not-too-distant future, and when that happens, we'll consider it through a proper process. And when we've come to a conclusion, when we've come to a final decision in relation to it, we'll announce it.
Would you like to see anything that the government does tied to protecting jobs, protecting action that would result in further job losses?
You're really asking me to engage in a hypothetical discussion. I mean, we are conscious of the fact that Qantas operates in a vastly different competitive environment today than it did when the Qantas Sale Act was legislated. There are some discussions to be had around this and various other options that have been speculated about, but I mean, the government is going to consider these things in a proper, methodical fashion through a proper process.
On the question of the debt ceiling, on the day the election was announced, the day he made his pitch to voters, Tony Abbott said, "Only the coalition can be trusted when we say there will be no deals with the Greens, no deals with flaky independents, no deals whatsoever." Yet Joe Hockey did one yesterday with the Greens. Why?
Well, we haven't done a deal to form government with the Greens, as we said we wouldn't. What's happening here is that the Labor Party in opposition is even more economically reckless and irresponsible than what they were in government.
But Mr Abbott said no deals whatsoever.
Well, we haven't done a deal to form government with the Greens. What we're doing is we're making sure that there's certainty and stability for the markets, that there's certainty around the capacity of the Commonwealth to finance its operations. Now, the Labor Party left behind a budget in a complete mess. We're dealing with the debt legacy and the debt trajectory left behind by the Labor Party. We are committed to ensure that the Commonwealth has got certainty around the financing requirements over the forward estimates, and that's what we're achieving by getting the support of the Senate. Obviously, what the government is proposing to do has to have, ultimately, a majority in both houses of Parliament, so that's what we've got to do.
So it's a reality in dealing with particularly a minority government in the Senate that you'll have to do deals with the Greens or deals with independents to get your legislation through.
Well, we're not a minority government, but we don't have a majority in the Senate, and we've got to make sure that in the national interest we are able to guarantee the financing requirements of the Commonwealth over the forward estimates. Now,
and you're prepared to do deals with the Greens in the future if that's what it takes?
We will always pursue the national interest. We'll always ensure that we are able to implement our agenda, which is to repair the budget mess that we've inherited from the Labor Party, to strengthen our economy and to create more jobs. So, I mean, if the Greens want to support our policies to scrap the carbon tax, to scrap the mining tax, and to negotiate with us on implementing our agenda for a stronger economy and stronger growth and more jobs, then obviously we'll talk to them.
What level of gross debt would you be prepared not to go beyond?
Well, I mean, our commitment is to bring the budget back to a believable pathway back to surplus and to start paying off debt. We want to reduce debt, not increase it. But what we're dealing with now is a situation that was left behind by the Labor Party. You've got to remember, in the period from May to August this year, the budget deficit over the forward estimates deteriorated by $33 billion. That was assuming that a whole range of savings measures that Labor had banked in the budget but not legislated. So they had banked savings measures in the budget, such as a $2.3 billion cut to higher education. They're now walking away from. So they banked the savings in the budget. They didn't do the hard yards, legislating the cuts that they banked in the budget, but we're now having to do the dirty work for them. But Labor is walking away from it.
So you proposed a debt ceiling of $500 billion. Is that what you are prepared not to go beyond?
Well, I mean, we obviously proposed the debt ceiling of $500 billion on the basis that that would ensure that over the forward estimates that would provide certainty around the financing requirements of the Commonwealth. So, I mean, our commitment is to reduce debt, but we know that as a result of the mess that Labor left behind, that debt was heading past $400 billion. We also know that the previous government had advised that it was prudent to have a $40 to $60 billion buffer in order to manage the refinancing arrangements along the way. So, I mean, what we've put forward was a responsible course of action, but you know what we've now ended up with will provide certainty to markets and will provide certainty around the financing requirements of the Commonwealth.
As you mentioned, you did go to the election talking about getting debt down. Is your aim not to hit that expected target of debt going over $400 billion? Well, our aim is to reduce debt as fast as possible, but the problem is that we have inherited from the Labor Party a budget that was in a mess at the time of the election and that has deteriorated further as a result of the trajectory we inherited from Labor. And I mean, you also got to remember there are a whole range of issues that we've discovered since the election. Problems that Labor was aware of, problems that had a cost attached to them that Labor did not properly provide for in the budget. So we're obviously right now, as we prepare the mid-year economic and fiscal outlook, we're working our way through all of those problems that we've inherited from the Labor Party, making sure that there's appropriate provision to deal with them in the budget. For example, offshore processing. They said they were implementing offshore processing, didn't provide the necessary funding for it. For example, they imposed a 2.25% efficiency dividend across government, which would cause redundancies, didn't make provision to fund those redundancies, about $500 million cost. So, I mean, these are all the sorts of issues that we've got to deal with. You said the budget is deteriorating. In an earlier interview on this program, you said that the budget was deteriorating, but not at the rate it was deteriorating earlier this year. Is that still the case?
Well, obviously we'll update the state of the budget estimates in the usual way in the mid-year economic and fiscal outlook. It'll be before Christmas. It's not much longer to go, Lyndal, and I'm happy to come and have a chat to you about it when we release the update. When
you say before Christmas, will it be before Parliament is due to rise? Will the Parliament be able to see it? Well,
what we said, well, the Parliament, of course, will be able to see it. You know, obviously, I mean, that's just by definition. I mean, the Parliament will be able to see it. What is happening, of course, we wanted the national accounts for the September quarter to be reflected in the mid-year economic and fiscal outlook to ensure that the revenue data was as accurate as possible. One of the problems of the previous government is that they always got their revenue figures wrong. They always overestimated their revenue. They always underestimated their expenditure. We want to ensure that we've got the most accurate data possible. That's now getting fed into the data systems, and that will be fed into the process. And in good time before Christmas, we'll be releasing it.
Mathias Cormann, thank you very much for your time.
Good to be here.